My name is George Brockman, Dodo Brockman from Freeport, Maine. I was a Spec 5 in the Army. I was in Vietnam from 68, 69. I was born and raised in Freeport. Since 1948, I'm 76 years old. I grew up mostly in South Freeport. People come into Cascabay Yard or see me on the street, doo-doo, blah, 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 blah. My older brother, Bill, and a kid across the street, we lived in South Freeport on the water down there, Stewie Wooden. Stewie and I were just always together. And he'd lay in his crib with a window there, and it wasn't that far to our house, and he'd holler Dodo. So Billy, my older brother Billy, and Stewie started calling me Dodo. So it's been with me the whole time, Doo-doo, Dodo. People say, shit, what'd I call you? I said, when my mother said George, I knew I was in trouble, very much so. In June of 1968, that's when I got drafted. I was going to college up in Lewiston at Bliss College, all of 100 students. But so I got drafted. The day I got drafted in Portland, I was sitting there, and they'll get us in these desks with alphabetical order. And this biggest guy I ever saw in my life that was a Marine said, I need 4 volunteers. Of course, my name's B for Brockman. There were 4 guys ahead of me. So I didn't end up being a Marine. So I ended up getting drafted. I went to Fort Dix. At Fort Dix, I was offered candidate school for officer. So I said, yeah, I'm interested in it. There were a whole bunch of other guys who were doing the same thing. So I ended up going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for advanced training. And from there, I was on my way to officer's candidate school. But at the time the war was going on, the schools were so far behind, I'd have to wait 6 months to come out 6 months before I even start my 10 months of being an officer. So I declined that, and you were allowed to do that. And so when they had their tell us where we're going after we're leaving, I was sent to Vietnam. So to just reiterate a little ways, on a day I got drafted, a guy named Quentin McConnell from Gray, who lived 10 miles from me, and we had 1 million friends, never met till that day. So Mac's on the same trip I am. We'll go to Nam, we're in Long Bend, they call out your name, they tell you to go over there, blah, blah, blah. So ended up, both of us headed to the 35th Engineer Group in Quy Nhon, which is a coastal town this side of Da Nang, as per se. We got there, so we're new guys, and now we're going to be sent to a battalion or a company out in the Willywags. All we're doing is building bridges, houses, or whatever. And so they figured, they'll disperse us. Well, they ended up liking us. We were only there 3 days, and I became a clerk typist, and he went to personnel. 3 days after that, we got on an LST and headed to Camaron Bay. And from Camaron Bay, Mac and I were the only guys who wasn't sick on the ship, I think, but we had a good time. So we got to Camaron Bay, all the sand, and I was a clerk typist in an S4 office where we kept an eye on all the equipment. We had 6 battalions and 4 companies to each. A lot of people, a lot of things going on. And Camaron Bay then was a big support command base. And so I ended up clerk typist for a while, and then I used to take the lieutenants to all of the depots and find equipment and stuff like that. And I became good at it. So that's what I did for a long time. I went around and found equipment that was sitting there idle. It wasn't being used for a purpose because it belonged to a National Guard unit or some other company that headed back to the States. And their paperwork and processing time was crazy, but I found a way. And so I ended up, I spent 19 months and 1 day in Vietnam. So my total, I get a 5-month early out because I had less than 5 months left in the service. So I didn't see much in Nam except, I think about this now, my first day in Vietnam, second day in Vietnam, I'm in Quy Nhon, and I'm on garbage duty because you're a new guy. I'll never forget this. On the bridge we went across, all there was heads of North Vietnamese people, and it was wild. But I didn't get to see the action like a lot of other people. I saw a B-140 rocket go over my head in Cam Ranh Bay, first time I was ever hit, with no casualties or anything. And I stayed over there, and then came back to Fort Lewis and came back to Maine. And here I am. You're drafted, your government property. So we left Portland, headed to the airport. Plane was going to be late. So Quentin McConnell, I just met, and this guy, Kevin Foley, we had IDs. We got a cab, got some beer, sat behind the hangar and got a buzz on, drink a lot of beer. Crazy story. They weren't going to let Mac on the plane because he was under the influence of alcohol, but we let him on. But going through that, seeing people, the type of people, because remember, I was from Maine. I remember all the guys at Jerseys and all that, all good friends. Get your hair cut, get in line. I was in basic training, of course, at Fort Dix, and I'm in a building with probably 700 or 800 GIs, and I'm walking in, and I hear this, "Hey, Dodo," that's my nickname, and it's a guy, that kid I grew up with in South Freeport. He was dressed the same time he was in Connecticut. Really wild. But the whole experience of seeing that and knowing the people, and boy, sometimes it was, you said, well, I'm growing up quicker than I ever thought I'd be. And then I just went on to, into Fort Leonard Wood, and I got to say that going in the service, meeting the friends, and I had like 5 of us, all the same things, going back and forth to if we're going to go to OCS or not, and we all said, let's take our chances. One of my buddies, I just thought of this, I'm in Fort Lewis, Washington, on a bus, I just got off the plane from Vietnam, and it's sort of dusk, and it's raining a little, and I'm on a bus, school bus. I'm looking out the window, and there was a guy that I thought got killed. He was walking by, and I banged on the window. He just kept on going, but I finally got to get a hold of him, and I thought he got shot. He got shot, but he didn't get killed. He got shot in the butt on his way to the latrine and got a Purple Heart. My brother, Bill, which is a year older than me, he was in the Coast Guard. So he went in the Coast Guard when he was a senior in high school. And then my father was in the Navy. And my younger brother, no, I couldn't go in the service because of his heart. But yeah, my father was in the service, and my brother spent 4 years in the Coast Guard. Crazy, crazy. He was supposed to go in the Air Force with a guy named Buddy Cookson on the buddy system, which is funny. He turned around, and Captain Nab was the commander of the Coast Guard. Captain was our summer house next door. He was there the day we were having a party for my brother. He told my brother he wasn't going to the Air Force. 3 days later, he was in the Coast Guard. And so my brother spent 4 years in the Coast Guard. I used to use his ID because it said he was 21 and put my picture on it in the Coast Guard so I could have a beer. No, you grow up quick. You have friends and you don't have friends there. But you did it. So I tell people, just the experience and being a basic, and then you don't know where you're going, if you're going to Nam or Germany or something like that. But yes, I grew up a lot, very much so. Because I was going to go to engineering OCS, they said, well, where you go now is Fort Leonard Wood, because that's an engineering base for the United States Army. So we used to tell people MOS was different from an infantry guy, because the infantry guy, all he was supposed to do was shoot. Well, we had to shoot and build bridges at the same time, so that's what they taught us over there. But, and then, of course, being an engineer, and that's where I ended up going when I got to Vietnam, because I was at AIT Engineering and ended up going to an engineer group, which is amazing. When I got to Vietnam, and I ended up in Cam Ranh Bay, there was a guy that looked like me that had a dog, and the name was Spot. He was probably about this size. He had spots on. He was white with tan spots. And the guy had to go back home. So I inherited the dog, and it was Spot and I. Spot was with me, and I, of course, in the Jeep. He's in the Jeep. He'd bark at officers because he's going to take a seat, you know. But he followed me. He went with me every time I could. And he was well respected. I think there was one other dog in our company. And so I wanted to bring him back with me. At the time, family, friends was a veterinarian and said, Dodo, it's not good. Not to come back. I was coming back in December and snow and all that. It's going to be hard on it. And the dog was fairly old. So I ended up, the guy that took my place ended up taking care of Spot. But I never heard anything from whatsoever, so I don't know. But that dog hated the salt water. And the only reason I'd throw him in the water because then it would help if he had any fleas and everything. But he hated the water over there. But he could sit in my Jeep while I went in an office. Nothing would ever bother him. He wouldn't let anybody in the Jeep either. But I went to Australia a couple of times. That was fun. And for R&R, I got to see a little world. And then when I was leaving Vietnam, I was offered a job at Alaskan Barge and Transport to work in their depot system and everything. They were the biggest contractor of the United States government. But, you know, I was 20 years old and wanted to get back to Maine. So yeah, it wasn't meant to be. We had Sunday afternoons off. So it was 35 miles to Nha Trang. We used to go up and see some buddies up. So two of us are in the Jeep and a dog and a radio, and we're headed. Got our flak jackets and the helmets are not on. Can't have your muters on. We got an M79 grenade launcher and a 45 and an M16. And away we go. And it's not bad. The traffic, you know, there was not too much happening. So we went there, and on our way back, we thought we heard some gunfire. So we stopped to get ourselves in there and started heading back we had to get back to the bridge to get into Cameron Bay before 5:30. And so get up in the morning, go to do motor stables, and that's what you did on your vehicles. And you happened to be one of the lieutenants walking around, checking on what's going on. And I found a bullet hole in my Jeep in the back behind the gas tank. That was wild. And then the only other time didn't see any combat, but the night that we got hit, I was standing outside the barracks talking to a buddy of mine. I just got done working at the club at 11 o'clock, and a B-140 rocket went over us, probably maybe 100 feet, maybe less than that over our head, into a big gully on the backside. And it barely exploded because it had to come so far. So in that time, all this stuff is happening. We had to go to the arms room, pick up an M14 and sit inside a bunker while they clear the area, and Snoopy's up and around. And so as everybody was running around, because we'd never been hit like that, one guy took out his M14, put some ammunition in, and started shooting streetlights out. So you got small arms fire, and there's probably 500 guys on my hill, and they're all going to be having weapons. We're lucky something didn't happen. But that young man, that guy ended up going in the boonies with the guys because of what he did. But that's all I can say about seeing anything happening there. I'm very fortunate. Somebody had to have my job, so I told everybody I had to do that. I was on a flight on a C-130 coming back from Da Nang on a Friday afternoon, and I had priority 1 flight orders. And so I went to get on a flight because I heard that they were going to get hit. So I bumped this full-bird colonel. He was going R&R, I'll never forget that. And I got on the plane. I got on a medevac plane, C-130, with all wounded guys. And these guys were not, they want to say they're not dying. You know, they're okay, and they're going to go to Cameron Bay Hospital, and they'll go from there, they'll go to Hawaii or whatever. So we're on the plane, and we're going to fly into, I forgot the name of the air base. It's a small one with a small runway, and the pilot says, I hate to say this, guys, but you might get a second Purple Heart. We had a problem with the landing gear. We landed, there safely. They thought they fixed it, filled up with fuel, headed out. We came to land in Cameron Bay, and I never saw so many ambulances and things chasing us down the runway. We made it. But I was, I saw guys, they told me, they were out in the field telling me stories that, you never want to hear again, but that's what they call war. The guy was my roommate, and then my buddy Mac, we ended up going, as I said, we were both in the same company there. And there were 4 guys in one of the end of a barracks, we had plywood to keep ourselves away from separated. I had bunk beds, and we had mama son come in and clean up and everything. And I worked in the club system at night as a bartender and up the hill, so that kept me busy too. But Quentin McConnell, Quinny, the guy that I told you that I went through service with, yeah, we knew each other up his death, which was probably 6-7 years ago. Yeah, and then I had a fun buddy. He was McJunkin, his name. His grandfather was J.C. Penney, and we asked him why he was a draftee. He says, I can't tell you the whole story, but that's why I'm drafted. And I remember him having his hair cut. That's when I met him. And he had long dreadlocks right down over his shoulders almost. And it was so funny to watch it happen. But yeah, I have probably Mac's the last guy that I was in Vietnam with. Kevin Foley, he got drafted with me. He came from Portland and everything, and I kept in touch with him. And then I was in Vung Tau on an Arvin transfer, and I was in a PX, and there's a guy that I got drafted with from Cape Elizabeth, but I haven't seen those guys in a long time. But yeah, you get friendships. It's something, yeah. But there was a lot. But I have a lot of friends that were in Vietnam the same time I was. It seems like I'm being fortunate to be in Cameron Bay. It's a lot of guys there, big support command. So we got mail every day, which was great. And and of course, Mac used to get the Portland Press Herald. I think we got it like 6 days later. But we corresponded with people back home. And then I just thought about this. I was in R&R in Australia with Mac. We had having a crazy time. Crazy. And I forget calling my mother up and talked to my mother at the same time they landed on the moon, whatever day that was, July something. And then the funny part is I went back to Australia 6 months later, or 4 months later, whatever, and went there at the same time they landed on the moon the second time. Liberty in Cameron Bay was Sunday afternoons. We worked 6.5 days a week. And I did get to see Bob Hope 3 days after we landed in Cameron Bay. Quinny and I climbed on top of a church in Cameron, and where we were stationed on this hill, and there was a big amphitheater down below, and Bob Hope was coming in. So we climbed up there, 6-pack of warm beer, and started watching the show. And these MPs came over and said, "You guys can't be up there." And I remember Max saying, "Well, just come on up and get us. We're just going to sit here and watch the show." But but R&R, all that stuff, Cameron Bay was a big place. You could go and I got two R&Rs, and I loved Australia. Great place. That was interesting to see. I almost went back to work there, so. When you went to Sydney, Australia, there was another 3,000 other GIs there, maybe even more than that. And get a taxi and give them $10, and you'd get a 6-pack of Foster's Ale, and he'd give you a trip to Sydney, and show you all the places, the zoo and all that, yeah. But the bars were open 22 hours a day. But it was interesting. I went back. Met some neat people over there. We were in a safe place. If you go 6 miles out, you weren't safe. But I had a guy that got married and then extended and divorced his wife and married a Vietnamese girl. And to this day, I think he's still there. I got a job at the club, which is great, the EM Club. So I worked there at night, 3-4 hours, and got paid $140 a month. That was a lot of money. I didn't have a way to spend it, but we We had the people from the village of Cameron Bay who worked there, and we had shows from Australia and all that came because we were in a safe place. And we got to meet some neat people. You know, and I got to say, going through the service, as far as a captain's a captain, a lieutenant's a lieutenant, and I'm a Spec 4 or an E2 or something, to an extent that's meaningful, but still the human beings. I got a lot of good friends over there. I had a captain that was not a captain. He was an E6, and he ran the AM club and the officers club. And we became friends, and he was a captain. And he looked undercover at how much stuff was going on in the club systems over there. You know, a lot of money exchange and things like that going on. And he was over there. It was wild. They had an officers club in Cameron Bay that had a round bar that must have been 100 feet around. And I could tell you a funny story right now. We had a captain named Schatz, and he ran an asphalt company, and they were right on our hill. And he came up to me and says, Dodo, he says, I need a new Jeep. This thing's wearing out. I can't keep it going. We can't get part, blah, blah, blah. He says, come on, you can get connections. I saw you the best way to do it. Go up on a Wednesday night's the big night. They have the show up, the officers club. Go steal a Jeep. Bring it back to the motor pool. We'll strip it, and it'll be gone. We'll take what's remnants of it and put it up on Tiger Hill and bury it with a D290. Nobody will ever know the difference, will they? He says, you guys, I said, okay. Two of his boys show up with a Jeep. We pull it in our motor pool in the building, stripped it right down, put all the engine and transmission and everything in his old Jeep with the same numbers, and took the new Jeep up to Tiger Hill, fired up a 290. This is probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and buried it. And so Schatz had his new Jeep. And the Jeep he stole was a full bird kernel of the MPs, which is unbelievable. And then 3 weeks later, they found that Jeep. They were on-job training with the D290, and they dug it up. So nobody ever knew. But sometimes you had to steal stuff when I worked on a depot system to get it out there because they wouldn't let you go with paperwork. And here we are, need parts and stuff. I used to trade a pallet of Budweiser. There's 60 cases for a pallet of plywood. And then bring the beer back to the barracks and sell it to everybody for $1 a case. When I got out of the service, I came home from Fort Lewis, Washington, in a blizzard. And I flew into Logan, and I was still in my Army Greens, and it's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. My older brother, Bill, driving an Opel, left Portland, left South Freeport at my mother's house to come get me in Boston because I couldn't fly out. Time goes by, the bars are ready to close, and I finally get a hold of my mother. She said, Billy's back here. He couldn't find me in the airport. I said, the only place he would have found me is in a bar. And crazy thing, I went and I changed into civilian clothes and went to the bus stop. I went to the bus stop, and I went over to see the lady, and some guy ran over and grabbed my duffel bag. I'll never forget this. Grabbed my duffel bag. He was a homeless guy. He was taking off with it. He got my duffel bag back, and I didn't call the police, but the other people did, so that was kind of weird. But I remember coming home in a blizzard after leaving Vietnam at 100 degrees, beautiful weather, and then that. But yeah, welcome back to Maine. I lived at my mother's house. I went to work for Portland Motor Sales as a lot boy. And my father was selling cars at Forest City then, but lot boy, I drove a 65 Mustang, 2+2, white, yellow with a white interior fastback. Drove the wheels off that car. Had a lot of fun with that. And then I ended up leaving there and going to work for Ted Logan, for Logan Painting, through Bobby Harrison and I. And then I had an opportunity, very fortunate opportunity back in the day, to get a apprenticeship and become a sprinkler fitter and pipe fitter, and which was very interesting. And that was like going to college. So I got the government paid me X amount of dollars a month back then for 3 years when I served an apprenticeship. Apprenticeship was 3 years, and I got paid every month, like going to college. And that was really great, the GI Bill. I ended up with the GI Bill being, I bought my first home was we call them tin teepees, but a trailer, 14 by 70. And then I bought a house after that through VA. So I took advantage of those opportunities that people out there don't realize is there. And yeah, I have no regrets of ever being drafted or anything like that. I was an expediter, and I found equipment, like I said before, that was sitting idle all over the country and got it to other places, especially for the 35th Engineer Group or the 18th Engineer Battalion. And I found that stuff, and it really worked. Now, I'm gearhead anyway, so I was a gearhead before I went in the service. And, we played around. But, come back here and make a living, get married, when the sprinkler business was great. It was a great opportunity. I took a lot of benefits that most people don't want to get or don't want to get, don't know what's available, whatever, especially today. So I went to Bliss College and I had typing, and that's how I ended up being an S4. I was a clerk typist. I typed till I did nothing else to do, 8 hours a day, reports and stuff, and I was going crazy. And of course, I drove the lieutenants and the captains around, and then finally, they understood what skills I had, and it was really wild. I got to see a lot of the country. Spent a few nights in downtown Saigon. That was wild to see. But the only thing I say about it is, it's hard to say, was it worth it? I have friends that have been wounded and like that, but it's tough. The heck, we're paying for the war. We're paying as United States citizens to help our veterans that should get everything they can get. Even if you didn't go to Vietnam, even if you're an MP driver or something, you're still part of the armed forces. Some days you think you got it tough, and you look at the other guy, and then you get to experience a lot of people, hear a lot of stories. Because we all have stories, but I heard a lot of stories. Even when I was over there, from guys out in the boonies, a lot of stories. And there's some guys that just don't talk about them. But I'm going to say I'm a better person. Don't know what I'd be if I was just going to. Who would have known what? It was somebody had to have my job in the service, I tell people. My father was a car salesman, and he could sell ice cream to Eskimos. And my brother Bill did, and I could and still do, and my younger brother Dickie did. And I can really enjoy people and listen to what they have to say and what their stories are, and it's amazing. But still, going to see war, it's a tough one sometimes. But, all my friends came back. I didn't join the AMVETS till roughly 3 years ago, but I was always busy, always contributed if somebody needs something, or donated to whatever cause, that veterans or anybody like that. I've always done a lot of that. But now, as I slowed down a little in life, which is crazy, I got involved with the AMVETS. I was invited there. They had a Vietnam Veterans Day, and I went over, and of course some guys, I know everybody knows me, but I just never hung out there. And I started hanging out with some of my friends, and they do a lot for our community, and I enjoy the AMVETS. I have a lot of fun with them. And, I just never was involved with that until 3 years ago. They gave out $30,000 worth of scholarships this year to the town, which is amazing. But on the other thing, we do the car shows in the summertime, deeply involved with that. We put the car shows on, we charge $5. That goes help pay for the DJ, but I have a bar downstairs. We get great food, turn out 40, 50, 60 cars. And then, of course, we have a lot of community suppers as people have been there with spaghetti, fried clams. We've done that. You know, we have people like, you don't have to be a member to come to the AMVETS. You're more than welcome to join. And we have, if your uncle or grandfather was in the service, or, you know, you become a friend, and that's an organization within our organization. And we got a great bunch of people, and come visit us. We're always helping wherever we can. It's a good group of people. We always love to have new members, and we're getting some all the time. If you think you want to enjoy, come to the AMVETS. We're open from 2 to 8, and 12 to 8 on the weekends. Downstairs, bang on the door, hit the buzzer, come on in, say hello, come around, ask the members, drink a beer, see what we do. We have a great group of people that show up. And if you like cornhole, we got horseshoes, shoot a little pool. You can play pool tickets. And it's great people. I've met some real nice people in different ways after joining the organization, which is great. I got a need for speed, and I used to own Casco Bay Yacht Exchange in Freeport. So did some boat racing. You know, I have race cars. I'm still racing my old vintage car once in a while. Yeah, I keep active. I'm involved with the Maine Vintage Race Car Association, and since it started, and enjoy that. A great bunch of people. You know, we're always looking for memberships of that. It's hard to find younger people that come up through the ranks like we have in every organization. But yeah, you know, I'm still doing boats, still building hot rods, a little racing cars, buying and selling some trucks. At my age, you got to do something. You can't stop. If you stop, you know what happens. I told everybody I'd be 100, but who knows? I think that we had World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, all those wars are different in a lot of ways, and technologies and stuff. But if a person wants to get into trade or anything like that, they can do that in the service. And the Bennies, I got a lot of friends that spent 20 years. That's a great opportunity. If you like doing that and find something that you like to do, then you got to work for somebody. They get great benefits, you know, and then if you only go for a couple of years, you get the benefits afterwards. That's what I say. It's a great opportunity. It's a different way that I've been in the service 50 years ago than what it is today. I've done a lot with Yarmouth. I've done 20 or 30 Clam Festival parades and donated here and there. But yeah, it's Yarmouth Freeport. We're all together. Durham has an AMVETS. They have a Legion. But I chose the guys in Yarmouth. They're just a good group of guys. The flags that everybody has out during July and August and everything, but as I said, they could be out there 24 hours a day, be the best thing we can do. We got to support our veterans and our active duty members tremendously.